If you saw my last tutorial where I made different types of sublimation ornaments and you thought, well, those are cute. But Marilyn, not everybody has a sublimation printer. I've got you covered in today's video. In fact, in today's video, you might already have many of these things around your house. Here's what I'm going to use. I have these wood rounds that I got at Walmart. There's 6 in here, and I think they were about $2.24. Now, these don't have holes in them for your string or your ribbon, so I'm also going to use a drill. If you find some wood rounds that already have the hole in them, you won't need the drill. I'm also going to use some spray Mod Podge. I'll use some regular brush on Mod Podge, and then for one of the projects, I'll also use this Mod Podge transfer medium. So one of these projects is going to be very low tech. We are going to cut out a picture, we're going to glue it onto the wood, we're going to put a top coat on it, and it's going to be really cute like that. In the other project, we're going to dive into the use of transfer medium. Here's a better look at the wood rounds that I'm going to use. Like I said, I got these at Walmart, and I think they were about $2.24 for 6 of these. These are just like a basswood, just an inexpensive wood. These don't have the hole, so I'm going to start by drilling a hole in these. So I think I'll go right here. I'm going to go ahead and drill out the rest of these, clean them up, and then we're going to go on with the rest of the project. So here is how easy this is. This is something you could do with your kids, your grandkids, the kids at church. These are super easy to make. Now, if a child is doing this by themselves, are they going to turn out perfect? No, but that child is going to be so proud of it. For this, I'm using pictures that I printed out using my inkjet printer at home. Now, I want to use a couple of these for something else. I want to use a couple of them for transfer medium, and so I'm going to cut those apart because for these, I like to spray these with something to seal that ink in. If you're using transfer medium, you definitely don't want to spray them because that's going to make it where it impedes that transfer process. So if you're just putting it on top like this, I recommend go ahead and spray seal these. I'm going to use this Mod Podge gloss. I could just as easily use the matte, but on top I'm going to try the gloss. So rather than use 2 types, I'm just using this. Some other options could be the Mod Podge matte. It could be the satin clear. It could be another spray that's glossy. And truth be told, I could probably just seal it in with regular Mod Podge, but I'm going to use this spray today. And I'm going to go ahead and spray the front as well as the back. I did a light spray on both sides, the front and the back. I'm going to let it dry just for about a minute or 2, then it's time to cut one of these out. If you're doing this in your craft room, and if you have things in your craft room like cutting machines, sewing machines, embroidery machines, printers, I would recommend take that spray outside, get it away from your machines. You don't want the overspray to get in those. I think this is dry enough, so let me go ahead and cut one of these out. I'm not going to be too picky about this today because I'm just doing this as a demonstration. Also, I don't know if that spray sealant is necessary. It's just the way I like to do it. Okay, so let's see how that fits on there. That fits pretty well. I think I may have a little bit of excess, which I can cut out at the end using an X-Acto knife or something. But if you want to cut it down further, go ahead and cut it down further. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the Mod Podge directly on the wood for this. I'm going to use some basic Mod Podge. I think I got this at the Dollar Tree store. I like it when you get them in these smaller bottles because to me, it's easier to use this up while it's still good than get a great big bottle, open it, and it starts to get dried out. So I like these small bottles. I think they're convenient. I'm going to put a generous amount on there. And then I'm just going to brush it around with this. So now I want to go ahead and put my picture on, and I want to be strategic on how I put it down so that I make sure that what I want up is up in this area. So we'll put this down, and then I'm just going to push on it with my hand. I'm not going to pull and all that. I don't want to stretch my paper. I don't want to rip my paper. My favorite is to use a brayer tool. Very good. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry for about 15 minutes before I do anything else with it. I need to poke out the hole, and then I need to add a top coat to this. Your top coat could again be the spray Mod Podge. If kids are doing it, it could be the brush on Mod Podge. It could be Maker's Magic. It really all depends on if you're worried about brush strokes. For today, I'm going to spray these with that gloss varnish or with that gloss Mod Podge. Okay, that feels pretty good. So let's see. I think the first thing I'll do is go ahead and poke that hole through. And if you're working with kids, this is something that you could do. You could use a screwdriver. I'm going to use these scissors. You could probably use a weeding tool. And so we're just going to figure out where that is and poke it through. And then I want to push on it so it gets up against the side really well. The other thing you could use is if you have hole punches, like the manual ones, you could flip it over, put the hole punch in from this side, and punch that hole out. Maybe that'd make it look more perfect, but I'm happy with this. Now let's go ahead and cut away the excess. If you have your Cricut or other machine cut these out for you, they're going to be more round, they're going to be the shape and size exactly like you want them. Now you can cut away the excess like this with an X-Acto knife. If you're going to do that and you're working with kids, I'd say you ought to do this part yourself. And then I'm going to go around it and I'm going to knock off the edge of the picture where it meets the outside of the wood round. So we're just going to get those edges off. Oh, I kind of like how this is turning out. I'll put it up to the camera in a minute so you can see. That looks pretty good. So here's what it looks like so far. The next step is go ahead and put a coat of Mod Podge on top, or if you don't want to see those brush strokes, use a spray sealant. Whether it's something like this, the Mod Podge matte, or in my case, I'm going to use the Mod Podge gloss. And here's what it looks like so far with one coat of that Mod Podge gloss on there. You can see it's kind of sinking into the paper a little bit in areas, so I'll probably do a couple more coats of that. Now let me give you a comparison of that versus the Maker's Magic. So the bottom one is the one that has one coat of the gloss Mod Podge. The top left one, that has the matte Maker's Magic, and I see brush strokes in there. And then the one on the right has Maker's Magic gloss. I see brush strokes in that too. Now I think using something you brush on is more kid-friendly. If you want to have something that doesn't have brush strokes, you're probably going to have to spray it. Again, I'll put a couple more coats of that glossy Mod Podge spray on that one. The next ornament that I'll do will be the true photo transfer method. Now remember, with this one, you are not going to put a spray sealant on your paper at all. I've done these using inkjet. I've also done these using prints printed out of a toner printer. I do prefer the toner printer, but I want to show you what this will turn out like. Now, even though I just used a regular inkjet printer, I actually did print these out on sublimation paper because the sublimation paper has a really nice coating on it, and your ink doesn't sink through like it does with just regular paper. So I'm going to show you the process, and then I'm going to show you ones that have been done with the actual transfer medium versus with regular Mod Podge. They will both work and you're going to get a very different look. Now to do this, you're actually going to put your Mod Podge on the front of the picture. When you're using a transfer method, and if it matters to you what way the picture is facing, you're going to flip your image, because in the end we're going to put the transfer medium on it, we're going to place it down, and then we're going to take the back layers of the paper off, exposing the image. So if you do this, flip your image horizontally. So here's our basic Mod Podge. And this time I'm going to put it on the paper instead of the wood. I'm going to put a good amount on there. And then I'm just going to brush it on. I'm going to brush it all the way to the edges. And I'm going to try to hold the picture so it doesn't shift and get itself in the glue that's out here. Hopefully that made sense. Now that's lifting. Let's move it over so I don't get it in that glue. We'll put a little bit more on. And then we'll paint it over to this side. Make sure you get plenty of this on. That's what transfers the ink to your wood. Okay, so just like the last time, we have to have the head up where it would be. We're going to place this down, and then I'm going to press on it. I'm going to hold it on one side while I kind of press and move it out. And then to make sure I have an excellent bond, I'll use the sprayer tool again. I will hold the paper, and I'll bray in that direction. Then I'll hold this side, and we'll come this way. Now the hardest part of this project is setting this aside for at least 24 hours. Let me show you what this looks like if you actually use the transfer medium. That's this. So when you're using the actual transfer medium, it's going to have an opaque white base. So here it is. I'm going to go ahead and shake it up some. I'm going to pour it directly on the picture. This is thicker than regular Mod Podge, and I am pretty generous with mine. And just like the Mod Podge, we're going to brush this to cover the entire picture. Now you see how white that is? It doesn't show through nearly like the regular Mod Podge does. And that's going to cause a very different effect on your ornament. So we're getting this all over the entire picture. And then we're going to set it down on the wood blank just like we did the last one. So I'll grab a wood blank. Figure out what's the top. It's harder to see through this one, but I know her head's at the top now. Then we'll press this down. I can try to slide it down just a little bit. And then let's smooth it out. So first I do it with my hands, then I use a sprayer. Now you might have some Mod Podge squeeze out the sides because I put so much on. So let's put it on the paper to protect my desk. Okay, don't know what that is, but it's going to be fine. And you really, really need to have good contact between your picture, the Mod Podge, and the wood blank. So at this time, I would set these aside and I'd let them dry at least 24 hours. Let me grab some that I've already done this process with. I did it a day and a half ago, and then I'll show you how the rest of the project is done. So here's 4 pictures I did on wood. So this one is toner printer, and I used Mod Podge. This is toner printer, and I used the transfer medium. It's also Mod Podge. This was inkjet printer, I used Mod Podge. And this was inkjet printer, and I used the transfer medium. When I printed these out on the inkjet printer at home, I just used regular copy paper. So see how it kind of bleeds through the back? That's why on those others, I used the sublimation paper. I think I just get a little bit better image. Now it was regular ink. I didn't use a sublimation printer, but I did use sublimation paper. Other coated papers would have the same effect. To get the paper off the back of this, you put it in water or you run it under the faucet. I'm going to go ahead and put this down inside here, and you can see those pictures through the paper. I can kind of tell when it's ready because I'm not going to see all that white like I do there. That paper still needs to be saturated. Now this down here looks fine. Let's start with this one. So this is the one that I printed the picture on an inkjet printer, and I used regular Mod Podge. What I'm going to do is just go in circular motions to pull off those top layers of paper. And you want to be careful with this because there is a point where you go too far and you're starting to get ink off with your paper. Also, I like to do these in baby steps. So I like to do some, let it dry for about 15 minutes, and then do some more. So I'm going to do this process through all 4 of these, and I want you to see the difference in the results. I can already see some of that ink coming off with that paper, like it saturated up through the paper, but so far it's looking pretty good. There is a lot of that ink coming off though. All right, we're going to stop right there for now. Now, this one is using the regular Mod Podge, but this picture was printed on a toner printer, so a laser toner printer. A lot of the times where people work, you have the big copy machines, those are laser printers. I think you can probably have places like, gosh, it used to be Kinko's. Where else can you have pictures printed these days? Maybe Staples, maybe the UPS store. But if you want yours to be printed out with a toner printer, you can find a store where you can have them printed. Okay, I'm going to leave that one alone for a while. Let's move over to the toner printer where I used the transfer medium. So in this one, instead of using this regular Mod Podge, I use this transfer medium. Now look at all the ink coming up with the regular inkjet printer. The last one I have to do is the inkjet printer with the transfer medium. Again, I'm having a lot of ink come up with that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let these dry. Let me rub on this a little bit more because I can feel there's more paper to come up. I'm going to let all these dry. You're going to see in a little bit that some of the paper comes back. You're going to see some white haze. And so after 15-20 minutes, I'll go ahead and probably rub off some of that excess paper again. But so far you can see this was printed with a toner printer with regular Mod Podge used. This was printed with a toner printer with this transfer medium used. The difference is you see more of the wood color background in this. And in this one, you have that white base behind it. So that picture is going to pop just a little bit more. It'll become more obvious once these dry. Down here, this is the inkjet printer using regular Mod Podge. Here's inkjet printer using the transfer medium. Those aren't nearly as dark and nice as the ones where I use the toner printer. So let's take a look at some that I've already just played with to see the differences. Now these have no top coating yet. These were put in water, you rub the top, you let it dry, put it in water again, rub the top, let it dry. You do that as many times as you feel you need to. This one was a toner printer, and this was using regular Mod Podge. So you see how it has a little bit more of a sepia look, kind of that brown look under it, because there's no white underbase. Now this one was also a toner printer, but this has the white underbase behind it, meaning this transfer medium, the Mod Podge transfer medium. That's what it looks like. So if I compare the two, you can definitely tell this one has a more woodsy look. And then this one is one that I did with an inkjet printer and regular Mod Podge. It still looks okay, but it doesn't have the color saturation left that these do. Now I don't want to spray anything in here in my craft room, so for the tops of these I'm just going to use basic Mod Podge, but I want you to see how the colors come out a little bit more when you do that. I'm going to use this brush. The bristles are fairly soft. I think those leave less brush strokes than if you use those sponges like I was using, or with a harder bristle brush. I'll put a little bit on top, and we'll just brush this on as evenly as I can. Now these don't have any holes in them. These were just for experimentation. This Mod Podge has kind of a white milky look to it, so we're going to have to let that dry. And I could have tried to get more of that top paper off of there, but actually, even though you see a little bit of haze, that's not too bad for these. It is hard to get all that paper off without removing the ink. So I'm going to let those dry. Meanwhile, I think I will take this outside and spray it, so you see the difference that spray makes. So take a good look at it, and then I'll just cut back to basically this picture after it's sprayed. Now this one does have a few bubbles in it, and you can see on her pant legs and the red parts of the image that I did use an inkjet printer on this, because you can see that some of that red was removed. It just left kind of a yellow look. This has been drying for quite a while, and you can really see the difference now. I would not use an inkjet printer if you're doing photo transfers. So if you're using a transfer medium, or if you're using the Mod Podge. If you're printing them out just to stick on top of the wood round like I did with the first image, you'll be fine. And then there's the two that I used the toner printer with. The one on the left was basic Mod Podge. The one on the right was the Mod Podge Transfer Medium. If you're going for a rustic look at all or a natural look at all, that one on the left looks great. So the only thing I would have to do on these now is put a top coat on. Also notice on this one how that transfer medium squeezes out, and you'll see it on the sides of your blank if you're not careful. So let's look at the two that I showed you before I put the top coat on, and here's what they look like after putting the top coat on. You just don't see all that fuzz and that haze that you did before I added the Mod Podge on the top. In the end, if you were to do this project, which one would you use? Would you use the easy method and just glue that photo down, then put a top coat on it? Or would you use one of the transfer mediums? Now, of course, I would still have to put the ribbons on these, but I really just wanted to demonstrate the process and the differences in the processes. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until my next video, bye-bye.